Humans have been making mouth sounds for somewhere between 1.5 million and 2 million years, and for most of that time, nobody had any idea what anybody else was saying. You are Grug. You have a stick. You have a rock. You have approximately 40,000 things that want to eat you. And you cannot say a single word about any of it. How do you survive? How do you warn your friend about the snake? How do you ask someone to please stop eating your berries? This is the story of how your ancestors went from total silence to full sentences, and it took so long that by comparison, the entire Roman Empire is basically a long weekend. Let us start at the very beginning. Which was, genuinely, terrifying. Picture early Homo erectus. 2 million years ago. No shelter with a door. No phone. No Google Maps. Just vibes and a sharp rock. The world is enormous and full of things with more teeth than you. Your group of 20 to 30 people is the only thing standing between you and becoming a hyena's Tuesday. You need to coordinate. You need strategy. You need to tell Greg to go left and Thud to go right, or everyone goes hungry again. But here is the problem. You have no words. You are, at this moment in evolutionary history, operating at roughly the communication level of a very stressed golden retriever. And here is where it gets genuinely wild. Scientists believe the very first step toward language was not words at all. It was hands. Before mouths got serious, humans were gesturing at each other constantly. Point at the mammoth. Mime throwing a spear. Hold up your hand to say stop, or I will leave you here for the wolves. This is called the gesture-first hypothesis, and researchers at institutions including the University of St. Andrews found that great apes today still communicate almost entirely through gesture, over 66 distinct gestures with understood meanings. 66. That is basically a full conversation without opening your mouth. Grug could order dinner and file a complaint with management and never say a single syllable. But here is the flaw in the gesture plan. You cannot gesture in the dark. You cannot gesture with both hands full of mammoth. And you absolutely cannot gesture from behind a bush while you are trying to ambush a bison. The hands were not enough. The mouth had to get involved. And it gets better. Or worse, depending on your feelings about noise. The first mouth sounds that actually meant something were almost certainly stolen from animals. This is real. Researchers studying early human communication believe that imitation, copying the calls of birds, the grunts of prey animals, the sounds of the environment, was a critical bridge between gestures and actual speech. Hunters coordinating a mammoth chase would make sounds that stood in for the animal. A specific grunt meant mammoth. A different grunt meant run. Another grunt probably meant that was Grug's fault and everyone knows it. This is also, by the way, the origin of why humans are so good at imitating sounds. Your brain has dedicated circuitry for vocal mimicry that most other primates simply do not have. You are, on a deep neurological level, built to copy sounds you hear. Which explains karaoke. Scientifically. Grug hears bird. Grug makes bird noise. Grug is now, in some fundamental sense, the ancestor of every person who has ever done a spot-on impression at a party and would not stop. Now, here is the part nobody talks about. While the adult hunters were outside doing very dangerous gesture and grunt coordination, something else was happening back at camp. And it turns out this second thing might have been just as important. Possibly more. Mothers talking to babies. Linguist and anthropologist Dean Falk at Florida State University proposed what she called the putting the baby down hypothesis. Here is how it works. Most primates carry their babies constantly. Baby clings to mother, mother moves freely, baby feels safe because it is attached. But early humans, walking upright with their hands increasingly busy doing things, carrying food, holding tools, making pointed sticks for reasons, could not always hold the baby. And a baby that is suddenly not being held does what babies have done for 2 million years. It panics. It screams. It alerts every predator within half a mile to exactly where the group is sleeping. So mothers had to invent a replacement for physical contact. They had to use their voices. This is where the sing-song sounds came from. The high-pitched, rhythmic, melodic, slightly embarrassing sounds that adults make to infants, which researchers call motherese, were not just comfort sounds. They were proto-language. A specific tone meant you are safe. A different tone meant pay attention. Another tone meant please stop eating that rock. These sounds got associated with meaning. They got repeated. They got passed down. Grug's grandmother's grandmother's grandmother was essentially running the world's first language class, and her students were tiny, bald, and absolutely losing their minds about a leaf. But here is the crazy part. This motherese theory suggests that some of the very first consistent, meaning-attached vocalizations in human history were not about hunting, or territory, or food. They were about connection. About comfort. About telling someone small and scared that everything was going to be okay. Which is either the most heartwarming thing in this entire video, or proof that Grug was a softie all along. Grug choose both. Now let us talk about the throat. Because here is a thing your body did that changed everything. The human larynx, your voice box, sits lower in the throat than in any other primate. Much lower. This seems like a minor anatomical detail. It is not. A lower larynx means a longer vocal tract. A longer vocal tract means a much wider range of sounds you can produce. You can make vowels. You can make consonants. You can make the full rolling complexity of actual speech. A chimpanzee's larynx sits high in the throat, great for breathing while drinking, very bad for language. You gave up the ability to breathe and swallow at the same time in exchange for the ability to say words. You choke on food occasionally because of language. You literally traded safety for vocabulary. Grug find this a reasonable trade. Grug's still mad about the mammoth, but at least he can complain about it out loud. The fossil evidence suggests this anatomical shift was largely in place for Homo sapiens by around 300,000 years ago. But here is where scientists get into very heated, very niche arguments. A modern-shaped larynx does not fossilize. You cannot dig up a voice box. So researchers have to look at other evidence, the shape of skulls, the structure of the hyoid bone, which is the small bone in your throat that anchors your tongue muscles, and the neural wiring visible in skull impressions. And what does that evidence say? It says that the Neanderthals, our close cousins who coexisted with Homo sapiens until around 40,000 years ago, almost certainly had a hyoid bone very similar to ours. Which means they probably had some version of speech too. Neanderthal language. Grug has opinions about Neanderthal language, but Grug will keep them to himself because Grug's great-great-grandmother may have dated a Neanderthal, and this is awkward. Scientists estimate that fully modern language, with grammar, with syntax, with the ability to talk about things that are not currently in front of you, probably developed somewhere in the last 100,000 years. Maybe as recently as 50,000 years ago. This is called the behavioral modernity hypothesis, and it corresponds with a sudden explosion in human behavior, art, long-distance trade, complex tools, burial rituals, cave paintings. All the things that require being able to say things like, I have a vision for what this wall could look like, or let us bury Thud with his favorite rock, he would have wanted that. And here is the modern mirror. Because this is not just ancient history. This is you. Every toddler on Earth goes through the exact same stages that your ancestors did over 2 million years. First, gesture. Babies point before they talk. Then imitation sounds, they copy what they hear, just like those hunters copying animal calls. Then melodic babble, the sing-song motherese phase, where sound and emotion are fused together. Then words. Then grammar. Then the unstoppable flood of questions that starts around age 3 and does not stop until approximately forever. Your child is not being annoying. Your child is speedrunning 2 million years of human linguistic evolution in about 36 months. Cut them some slack. Grug is impressed, honestly. And one more thing, because this one is genuinely strange. Research published in the journal Science found that when you analyze the sounds in human languages from around the world, from isolated indigenous languages in the Amazon to languages in East Asia to languages in Central Africa, the most common sounds, the ones that appear in almost every human language independently, are sounds a human infant makes naturally. The sounds that are easy for a small human throat to produce. The sounds mothers heard and repeated back. The sounds that got reinforced for thousands of years before anyone wrote anything down. Which means the words at the foundation of human language were not invented by a genius. They were not handed down by anyone special. They were baby sounds. They were the sounds of a tiny human being comforted by a tired mother in the dark, 200,000 years ago, who had no idea she was building the future. She was just trying to keep her baby quiet so the wolves would not find them. Grug think about this and feel something. Grug not have the word for it yet. But he working on it. If this made you want to know more about how Grug went from gestures and baby sounds to actual civilization, badly, and with many injuries, hit subscribe. Next time, Grug discovers that his ancestors were keeping score on bones 60,000 years before anyone invented math. And Grug very much has thoughts.